Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Stab Sleep Clever, and today we're going to be covering these really nice photos by Klein. I found these in a Google search the other day, and there's a whole set of them, and something stuck out to me. So basically what we're going to cover is the dynamic symmetry I think they used in the composition of these models. And I'll show you, these are all sized to the 1.5 ratio, which means we can use the 1.5 grid, and we're going to use the MAD, which means major area divisions, and that means there's 4 smaller ones inside the mother. So that's just the basic armature in there. We've got 2 major diagonals and 4 reciprocal diagonals, and then the horizontals and verticals. And I will put this on white so you can see it. And then the MAD grid means there's 4 smaller ones inside that. So when we break it down further, we're able to compose the smaller elements of a photo, painting, or anything else. So we'll use the MAD, and we'll just go down the line, and I'm going to point out some other design techniques that I might see. But right off the bat, I thought this was a composite just because you can see that, you know, the lighting's matching everywhere, but everything's sharp. And if anybody that's shot photography knows that you can't get everything sharp in the scene like this. You'll usually have, if you're focusing on the distance, you'll usually have foreground elements blurry, and then if you're focusing on the foreground, you usually have background elements blurry. So right off the bat, I think it's a composite. Nice lighting though, everything's matching properly. The lighting's coming from the left side here, hitting all the models, even the guy in the background. We're gonna look at the figure-ground relationship. Not everybody's going to be clearly separated from the background, which is fine, but as long as the main elements of their figure are clearly defined, that's what we're looking for. So like the head is basically what everybody's going to look at, so we want to make sure those are clearly defined against the background. So right here, you know, we've got the light hair on the dark background, so we're able to tell that she's in front of the object. But over here with her outfit, you can see how the dark areas fall into the darkness of the machinery in the background. So if we wanted to pop her off of that background, we could use aerial perspective perhaps and create a little less contrast in the background elements. And then fade this, you know, you can reduce the contrast quite a bit just so she pops off the background a little bit. It just all depends on what you're going for, the story you're telling, and if it's worth the effort to pop her off. But for right now, most of her body's coming off the background, pretty nice. Same with this guy, his, like right where his chin is, the shadow of his chin's going in the darkness of this machinery right here. So if you wanted clear separation from that, you'd have to reduce the contrast, and he could pop off the background a little bit better. So let's look at the dynamic symmetry. If you're starting to use dynamic symmetry, you can start with the basic armature. That's what I recommend, and I always recommend just focusing on one diagonal, and that's the Baroque diagonal, going from the lower left corner to the upper right corner. And if you want to know more about that, I've got other videos on the subject. What the grid does is it promotes design techniques. So just if you're using the grid, you don't know anything about it, if you're aligning things to the grid, then you're automatically promoting design techniques, which could be repeating diagonals. And I've got a video on this. It could be coincidences. So this woman's on the Baroque diagonal. If you want to look for coincidences, you could see this vertical line coming down, hitting the bridge of her nose. And you can also align other elements on this vertical if you like to create more movement and unity. We want to look at this model, see her arm locking into this reciprocal diagonal. So you want to try and lock into the grid or parallel the grid if you can, and focus on diagonals, and that's going to promote these design techniques like 90-degree angles and dominant diagonals. So we definitely have a dominant diagonal here in this model. And if they can't lock in or match the diagonal, you can always parallel the grid. So her arm right here is not locking in, but it's paralleling right over here. Let's move on to this next one. More diagonals in the poses, and it looks like another composite. It's a nice one. It's just a composite though. The machinery in the background has created some visual confusion, mostly in this area here, because his outfit is dark, okay, and it's just creating these lines through her head and meeting this guy. So we have to try and look at what is going on here instead of understand it right off the bat. You want people to view your art with clarity rather than confusion, and you don't want them to try and guess at what's going on. So like this line in the background's going right to her mouth right here. So that could create an unwanted illusion if you're getting that coincidence there. So you just want to watch for that kind of stuff. Now we're looking at diagonals, and right here, his leg here, paralleling this reciprocal diagonal. You want to see how they're locking in. She's locking into this vertical here. She's locking into the diagonal. And if you wanted to increase this pose, and if you had the opportunity, you could make her leg extend a little bit out like this, and it could lock in into that diagonal a little better versus locking into that horizontal. So let's move on to this next one. They're definitely paying attention to diagonals, and it looks like they're on a mission to try and lock stuff into the grid here. She's laying on this diagonal, the shadows paralleling it. Chair's locking in. If you have an intersection point, that's an eye, and you can generate new lines from those. So you can draw a line straight up and down right here, and the chair is locking into that eye right there, that new line. Her arm's locking in here, okay? And nothing has to be perfectly mathematical when you're using the grid. If you're posing models and you're in nature, you can eyeball it and get it close enough. No one's gonna second guess that the geometry is just slightly off. It's just gonna look visually the same. Like this leg here, it looks like it's paralleling this diagonal, but it could be slightly off to the left, and that's fine if you're just eyeballing it and trying to fit things into the grid. Same with this leg, paralleling that diagonal. We've got nice figure grind relationship on this woman. This chair, it's nicely separated from her shadow. If it was entering her shadow here, we might have some visual confusion. This area gets a little confusing, and this foot right here is coinciding with the top of her leg, so it could create a unwanted illusion, but they do have a clear separation for most of it. Same with this model. Can't go wrong with a blank background like this white sand. He's clearly separated. Not down here, but his head and shoulders are. Got this one, she's locking in here and here, her arm. This shadow here appears to be paralleling that diagonal. Her arm is coinciding with the other model's arm. The leg is locking in here. I'm going to turn the MAD on. Might see more things locking in now. This leg is paralleling the diagonal. She's standing on this horizontal here. Some figure ground relationship issue here. See how the background, again, it could create visual confusion there. Just want to be mindful of that kind of stuff. We normally want probably the machinery coming up on this diagonal. That would be better. And then she'd have clear separation here. Let's check out this one. So they're organizing the models well enough, and they're locking in well enough. She's lining up to this Baroque diagonal, locking in on this vertical. She's on this reciprocal diagonal. She's on the vertical, and the chair's on the horizontal. So you just want to watch for figure ground relationships. So like the dark gown is meeting the darkness of the background. You want to pay attention to that. This, I don't like the top of her head going right off the edge of the frame there. Perhaps if they could have left a little bit more negative space at the top, that would be better. This one also have the head at the top there. It's not so bad because it's not her face looking up, you know, like this one. She's not looking up into the edge, and she's looking left, and she's got enough breathing room right here to not make it feel claustrophobic. He's locking in here on this reciprocal diagonal. She's locking in and paralleling there. This, we can obviously tell that they're paying attention to that horizontal. This sinister diagonal, she's locking in on the shoe there. And then they're also paying attention to balance. So if you're looking at this without the grid, we've got that vertical center line, and you want to see how the visual weight is distributed. So they've got a large figure here. They're playing with the size variation, small figure, and then we've got a medium figure, and then a small figure, and then the machinery. So from left to right, it looks pretty balanced. You know, use that center line as a fulcrum. And I cover this in other videos on cinematography, especially those recent ones. So if you're liking this information and you want to learn more, I do have links in the description below, and it includes books, videos, and all kinds of other things that I've created to help artists surpass their plateau and reach the master level and truly help them with these composition techniques. So if you like, check that out, and it supports the site and keeps the content flowing. So here's the next one. Let's turn the grid back on. You can see how she's locking in here, the knees locking in here. These legs appear to be paralleling this reciprocal diagonal. She's on the vertical here. It looks like her neck and shoulders are trying to parallel that reciprocal diagonal. The arm is locking in here, and this arm could have moved just a little bit to the left and it'd be aligning perfectly there. Want to pay attention to figure ground relationship, how this area, her dark outfit with the background, still running into some problems there. Dark on dark doesn't create visual clarity, it creates confusion, so they could reduce the contrast of the background if they wanted. Her head's getting cut off here. It's not as bad as the other one. Like I said, her gazing direction is going this way, so we're not drawing attention to the edge. We're actually getting enough breathing room here, this negative space, for it to not look too claustrophobic. And they're playing with the balance, okay? If you divide it in the center, we can see that if we're looking at the visual weight, we can see that perhaps it's a little bit right heavy because we have two larger figures plus the background elements with kind of two medium figures here. But they're also considering the dark shadow, which adds to the visual weight. Any contrast will add to the visual weight, so that's what they're calculating there when they're looking at the balance. So looks pretty balanced to me. So that's that one. There were a few that were vertical like this, which were nice, but I did notice some figure ground relationship issues I wanted to show you guys. This is the 4/3 grid. Okay, these were all cropped or photographed as a 4/3, and this one looks nice. Okay, that figure ground relationship is nice. If the chair were closer to her head, it would look like if the chair was on her head. They avoided an unwanted illusion there, which is good. This one, it gets a little confusing with the background in the foreground. You can definitely tell it's a composite. Beautiful photo of her, the lighting and everything, nice there. He would stand out better if he were separated from the background more. And then this metal thing looks like it's kind of going through her head, so they'd have better visual clarity if they just reduced the background a little bit better. And we can see if she's locking in. This doesn't really look like it's locking in as well as the other ones. This is definitely an error. Figure ground relationship looks like the machinery is sitting on her head. They should have separated it better, like the chair that we saw in this one. It's just a little bit of separation helps that visual clarity. But if you kind of look at it at a glance, it could look like a funky hat or something like that. So you don't want that, you want it to be visually clear. Right here's a little bit of a mistake on his leg because it's coinciding with the darkness of this chair. Looks like perhaps he's standing on the chair, like he's a miniature person. You just want to try and avoid any visual confusion. I do like the diagonals of the shadows. Some of them are paralleling right here, this reciprocal diagonal, which is cool. You can see if they're locking in or paralleling here. The center line, not many diagonals in these photos because they're portraits and close-up, and when you have portraits it's a little tougher to create diagonals. You can, like if her arm were more of a diagonal, you can use the limbs, but the hair is a diagonal, so that's nice. That's adding that nice dynamic look with when you add diagonals. It's not so boring. Okay, when you have verticals, straight verticals and horizontals, it looks kind of boring like the rule of thirds. So adding diagonals adds a little element of visual appeal. All right, so that's it for those. I did create a little practice thing. I'm gonna include a link in the description below, and it's gonna be a Photoshop file, and you can use this if you wanna try and rearrange different elements within the grid. I'm gonna include the grid, the MAD, and then the figures. The figures are just all Googled from the internet, and the lighting is gonna be different. You can do your best if you wanna just play around and try and just move these around and see how things line up, you know? And there's gonna be a layer with the shadows and stuff, but if you like, you can play around with that. But that's it for today. I appreciate all the support and the comments, and even if 6 people watch the video and it helps someone with their art, that's what all this is about, and I really appreciate the support, and I'm here to help you guys. So just comment below if you like, and if you want to see different artists, I will help you with that. All right, take care.